3 months from now, you're getting married." His father said it the way one announces the date of a quarterly report. Not a question, not a discussion, a fact. Nathan Cole stood by the panoramic window of the family penthouse on Fifth Avenue and looked at New York, a city that never asks for anything. It simply takes. The city glowed, breathed, moved, and it was free, unlike him. "It's a strategic decision," his father continued without raising his voice. "The merger with Whitmore Holdings will strengthen our market position. We close Europe, secure logistics in Latin America. This is bigger than a marriage." Bigger than a marriage? Nathan slowly turned. "This is my life. This is your responsibility." A pause settled between them, not loud, not dramatic, but heavy. His father looked calm. He wasn't pressuring, he wasn't threatening. He didn't need to. "Charlotte is a good girl," he added. "She loves you. That's what matters." Nathan gave the faintest hint of a smile. Love. Yes, Charlotte loved him, with that light certainty people have when they love status, a last name, and a future guaranteed by contracts. She was the perfect fiancée, well-raised, beautiful, proper. The daughter of the man his father had done business with for 30 years. No surprises, no risks. "You'll handle it," his father said. "You always do." That was the problem. Nathan always handled it. He ran a corporation at 32. He never allowed emotions to influence decisions. He didn't destroy deals for the sake of feelings. And that was exactly why his wedding in 3 months was already a nearly approved project. The date set, the engagement almost public, the guest list forming. His life was neatly fitting into a schedule. But in that life, one essential element was missing: choice. Later, when he was alone, he opened the calendar on his phone. The wedding date. 3 months. 91 days. He stared at it for too long, far too long for a man used to making decisions instantly. Why does it feel empty inside? Why does the thought of marriage bring neither joy, nor fear, nor anticipation? Only cold calculation. He turned the screen off. New York beyond the glass was alive, real. It roared, it breathed, it loved, it lost. And Nathan stood in perfect silence inside a perfectly planned life. And for the first time in many years, a thought appeared, one he couldn't explain rationally. What if this is a mistake?
The next day, the office moved in its usual rhythm. Glass, steel, coffee, fast footsteps echoing through corridors. The towering building in the heart of Manhattan that carried his family name. Nathan entered the building the way he always did, calm, unhurried. People nodded. Some greeted him. Some avoided his eyes. The owner. He nodded back and headed toward the elevators. That was when he saw her. He didn't register it immediately, didn't understand what exactly caught his attention. A woman appeared in his field of vision, light hair falling in soft waves, a composed profile. She stood at the reception desk speaking with one of the employees, holding a folder of documents. Ordinary, not deliberately striking, not trying to impress. And yet, he slowed his pace. She laughed, quietly, sincerely, not for an audience. And something inside him shifted, barely. Not desire, not even attraction, just interest. She turned slightly. Their eyes didn't meet. She was focused on the documents in her hands. Nathan kept walking. The elevator doors opened. They closed. And unexpectedly, he realized something. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about the deal, not about the wedding, not about family pressure. He was thinking about a stranger with a soft voice. He didn't know her name, didn't know what department she worked in, didn't know that in 3 months he was supposed to be married. He simply noticed her and rode up to the 42nd floor to another meeting that was supposed to be important. But it was no longer the only thing on his mind. That evening, he saw her again, and this time their eyes met. Briefly. Just a second. But it was enough for Nathan to understand something unsettling. The most dangerous thing in life isn't passion. The most dangerous thing is the moment when you begin to feel that you want something that doesn't fit into the plan. And his plan was scheduled 3 months ahead. There was no place for her. Not yet. That evening, the office emptied faster than usual. Glass walls reflected the lights of Manhattan. The city beyond the window grew deeper, darker, more alive. The corporate tower continued to glow, as always, impeccable, cold, controlled. Nathan stepped out of the elevator onto the first floor and headed toward the exit. He had almost passed the reception desk when he heard her voice. "Thank you, I'll pass it on in the morning." He had no intention of stopping. He never stopped because of coincidences. But his step slowed on its own. She was standing at the desk, placing documents into a folder. The light from the lamps fell softly on her hair, highlighting the natural waves. She looked tired, but not broken. Focused, but not cold. Real. He felt it before he understood it. She lifted her eyes. And this time, their gazes met. Not by accident, not in passing. Directly. There was no recognition in her eyes. She saw in him simply a man in an expensive suit, one of many. And that unexpectedly struck him. For the first time in a long while, someone looked at him without expectation, without admiration, without fear. Simply looked. He nodded, barely noticeable. She nodded back. A small gesture, meaningless. And yet something inside him shifted more strongly than it had that morning. The elevator behind him closed softly. Someone walked past. The security guard said goodbye. The world kept moving, and he stood a fraction of a second longer than he should have. "Good evening," she said calmly. Her voice was soft, confident. Not flirtation, not an attempt to impress, just politeness. "Good evening," he replied. His own voice sounded steady, controlled. But inside, control cracked for the first time. He turned and stepped outside. Cold air hit his face. The car was already waiting at the entrance. The driver opened the door. Nathan got inside. The door closed. The car began to move. Only then did he realize he was not thinking about meetings, not about the dinner with his parents ahead, not about the engagement they would speak about again tomorrow. He was thinking about the girl at the reception desk, about the way she had looked at him, calmly, without calculation. He did not know her name, but he knew one thing. It was a moment that did not fit the plan, and his life had never tolerated anything that stepped outside strategy. In 3 months, he was supposed to get married, and today, for the first time in a long while, it became clear. Something had already begun to change, and he wasn't sure he wanted to stop it. Morning started too early. Nathan had barely slept. He couldn't explain to himself why that brief glance in the lobby the night before refused to leave his mind. It was illogical, impractical, unprofessional. And yet, he remembered it too clearly. The way she looked at him, without expectations, without calculation, just looked. The office felt the same as always. Glass, metal, business voices, a financial report projected across the wall of the conference room. He led the meeting calmly, precisely, confidently. They listened, took notes, agreed. And at some point, he caught himself waiting. Not for a report, not for numbers, for her. The door opened. "Documents for the Whitmore Logistics Project," a steady female voice said. He looked up. She was standing by the table, holding a folder, a slight focus in her eyes. The light from the window traced soft, golden lines through her hair. Nathan nodded. "Leave them here." She stepped closer. Too close. He felt her presence before he saw her face clearly. No overwhelming perfume, no deliberate display. Just warm, living energy. She placed the folder on the table, and their fingers ended up almost side by side. Not touching, a centimeter. It was enough for his breathing to falter for a second. She stepped back. "If you have any questions, I'm on the 4th floor," she said calmly. 4th floor. He memorized it, as if it mattered. After the meeting, he didn't return to his office immediately. He remained by the conference room window, looking at the city and trying to understand what had just happened. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And at the same time, too much. He was used to women who knew who he was, to those who looked at him with expectation, with interest, with a plan. She hadn't looked at him that way. She had looked neutral. And strangely, that was what unsettled him. For the first time in a long while, something had shifted, and he wasn't entirely sure it should have. That evening, he learned her name. By accident. "Olivia Thompson," one of the managers said, handing over the staff list. "Very strong analyst. New, but promising." Olivia. The name sounded quiet, almost soft. He repeated it to himself. He shouldn't have, but he did. That same evening, he was reminded of the engagement. Charlotte had sent a message. "Dinner on Friday. Our parents want to discuss the press release details." Press release? About the wedding. About the strategic merger. About his life. He stared at the phone screen, and for the first time in a long while, he felt irritation. Not toward Charlotte, toward the simple fact that his future was already being formatted into official statements. He typed a short reply. "I'll be there." Then placed the phone on the desk. The office was quiet. Too quiet. He walked to the window. The city below shimmered with lights. He should have been thinking about the deal, about the market, about the company's future. Instead, he was thinking about the girl from the 4th floor, about the way she stood by the table, about the calm steadiness of her voice, about the absence of calculation in her eyes. He didn't know what this was. Interest? Curiosity? Or the beginning of a mistake? In 3 months, he was supposed to get married, and today, for the first time, he understood that there was a distance between what was expected of him and what he was beginning to feel, and that distance could no longer be ignored. He still didn't know that in a few weeks this distance would disappear too quickly, and that she would become the one person for whom he would be willing to break the plan. But for now, he simply remembered 4th floor and a name, Olivia. He didn't go home right away. The car stopped in front of the restaurant where he was already expected. Charlotte was seated at a table by the window, flawless, confident, wearing a dress that emphasized status rather than emotion. She smiled as he approached. "You look tired," she said softly. "Long day," he replied. She took his hand, a familiar gesture, almost official. There was entitlement in her touch, obligation in his response. "We need to discuss the details," she continued. "Dad is preparing the press release. We should agree on the wording. You understand how important this is." He understood. Everything was important. Image, market, stocks, reputation. Everything except feelings. "Of course," he answered calmly. Charlotte spoke about dates, guests, publications. He listened, nodded, responded when required. And at some point he caught himself mentally drifting to another image. Not the table, not the rings, not the guest lists, but the girl standing at the conference table saying, "I'm on the 4th floor." No calculation, no claim, no plans involving him. He let go of Charlotte's hand a second earlier than he should have. She didn't notice. She kept talking. He looked out the restaurant window at the night skyline of Manhattan, and for the first time in a long while felt not pressure, but doubt. Later, alone, he opened his calendar again. The wedding date, 91 days. The numbers hadn't changed. Something inside him had. He turned off the screen and realized the distance between duty and desire was no longer abstract. It was alive. It was growing. And if he didn't stop it now, it would soon be too late. But that night, he didn't stop anything. He simply allowed himself to remember. A name, Olivia, and the unsettling feeling that for the first time in years, his life was no longer entirely under control. Nathan began noticing her too often. And the strangest part, it wasn't accidental. Olivia would appear in conference rooms minutes before the others. She would leave folders so quietly that her footsteps were almost inaudible. She asked questions briefly and to the point, without trying to impress, without trying to shine. She simply worked. And that was what made it dangerous. Because Nathan was used to women who tried to leave an impression, who looked at him as if he were a summit to be conquered, who thought about what he could give them. Olivia did not think that way. At least, she did not show it. He told himself he was in control. He said you, formally instead of casually, kept the distance, met her only in professional contexts, documents, reports, approvals, signed papers, asked questions, dismissed her. But then he remained alone in his office and caught himself listening to the silence, as if expecting the door to open again, as if his attention had already tuned itself to her voice like a familiar background frequency. It irritated him, and at the same time, it pulled him in. On Friday, Charlotte took up half of his evening. The restaurant was expensive, perfectly lit, filled with the kind of air where people discuss the future as if it were a contract. She smiled the way women smile when they are certain everything has already been decided. "We'll send the press release after the corporate evening," she said, as if planning a vacation. "Dad thinks it will look beautiful. The entire company will see that you are stability, reliability, the face of the future." Nathan raised his glass. The words corporate evening sounded neutral, but something inside him tightened, because he already knew Olivia would be there, and he didn't know if he would be able to behave as though it were just another event. He thought he was in control. He addressed her formally, kept the distance, met with her only in professional contexts, documents, reports, approvals, signed papers, asked questions, dismissed her. But afterward, when he was alone in his office, he caught himself listening to the silence, as if expecting the door to open again, as if his attention had already attuned itself to her voice like a familiar background sound. It irritated him. And at the same time, it pulled him in. On Friday, Charlotte occupied half of his evening. The restaurant was expensive, perfectly lit, filled with the kind of air where people talk about the future as if it were a transaction. She smiled the way women smile when they are certain everything is already decided. "We'll send the press release after the corporate event," she said, as if they were planning a vacation. "Father thinks it will look beautiful. The whole company will see that you are stability, reliability, the face of the future." Nathan lifted his glass. The words corporate event sounded neutral, but something inside him tightened, because he already knew Olivia would be there. And he did not know whether he would be able to behave as if for him it was just another evening. On Monday, Olivia appeared in his calendar again. Not directly. Her name was listed among the participants of the strategic meeting, Project Whitmore Logistics. He held his gaze on the line a second longer than usual, then pressed confirm. Too quickly, as if trying to erase a strange reaction. At the meeting, she did not sit beside him. She sat to the side, slightly in the shadow, like someone who does not try to be noticed, yet becomes noticeable anyway. When she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, confident. She explained risks, timelines, numbers, and Nathan listened. Not because it was important, but because she was the one speaking. At one point, her eyes lifted from her laptop. She caught his gaze for a second and immediately looked away. But that second was enough for him to feel she sensed it too. Not the way he did, not as deeply, but still. After the meeting, people left the conference room in a wave. Brief phrases, jokes, calls, the familiar business rush. Olivia gathered her papers carefully, unhurried, as if reclaiming control. Nathan approached before he had time to think. "Olivia," he said. Her name sounded too alive in his voice. She looked up. "Yes?" There was no coquetry in it, only attention. "Good work on the risk assessment," he said. The phrase was neutral. She nodded. "Thank you." A pause. Nathan felt that if he said one more word now, it would be a step. Not professional, personal. He did not take that step. He took another, backward. "I'll see you at the corporate event," he said, and immediately realized he had said too much, because the corporate event should not have been a point he was already looking towards. Olivia gave a slight smile, polite, almost automatic. "Yes, of course." She lowered her eyes to the folder, but there was something tense in the movement, as if she too had heard more in that phrase than work event. He stood by the window that evening. The city glowed, lived, moved without asking permission. His phone lay on the desk. Charlotte had written, "Don't forget, at the corporate event you need to be flawless. It's an important evening." He didn't reply immediately. The words flawless and important evening echoed in his head too closely with another image. Olivia. Her calm voice, her gaze, her name, the way it sounded when he said it aloud and realized it was no longer just the name of an employee. He closed his eyes, and for the first time he admitted to himself honestly. The corporate evening would be a test, not for reputation, for him. And the worst part was that Olivia didn't even know she was part of that test. 3 days before the corporate event, Olivia received an email from the assistant. Ordinary. Guest list, dress code, hall details, and at the bottom, attendance confirmed, Nathan Cole. She read it once, then again, and suddenly felt something strange begin to form inside her, an anticipation she couldn't logically explain. And in that moment it became clear the distance between them was shrinking, not in steps, in seconds, and soon there would be an evening when neither of them would be able to pretend that nothing was happening. The corporate event was held in a hall with panoramic windows. New York beyond the glass shone as always, cold, confident, endless. Olivia did not enter immediately. Nathan noticed it before he saw her. First, the rhythm of the room shifted, as if the space itself had become denser, quieter, more focused. He turned almost instinctively. She was wearing a dark evening dress, simple, without provocation. Her hair was down, soft waves resting over her shoulders. There was no intention in her appearance to impress, and that was precisely why it did. She paused at the edge of the hall, taking in the room. For a second, their eyes met, and it became immediately clear this was no longer just a work evening. He did not approach her right away. He gave her time, gave himself time too. "Good evening," he said when he finally stood beside her. "Good evening," she replied, calmly, too calmly for what was happening between them. They spoke about the project, about numbers, about deadlines. The words were correct, safe, but the pauses between them were not. "It's too loud in here," he said at last. "Would you like to step outside?" She looked at him carefully, not as at a superior, as at a man making a choice. "Yes," she answered after a short pause, and that yes was enough. They drove in silence. The city moved past the windows, lights, reflections, motion. His shoulder was close enough that she could feel the warmth without touching. He kept his eyes on the road, but he felt her in every nerve. When the hotel room door closed, the silence became almost tangible. He didn't move first. Neither did she. They stood facing each other, as if making sure this was truly happening. He was the one who broke the distance. Not abruptly, not confidently, carefully. His hand touched her wrist, not holding, not demanding, simply asking whether she would allow it. She did, slowly, eye to eye, and in that moment, everything shifted. The kiss was not hurried, not greedy, as if both of them were afraid to scare away something that was only just beginning to take shape. He touched her as if memorizing. She responded as if trusting. No words, no promises. The night dissolved into movement, into breathing, into the quiet way they discovered each other, not even through their bodies, but through attention. He looked at her as if he wasn't seeing a woman for the first time, but a possibility. She fell asleep feeling his hand resting on her back, calm, steady, real. And neither of them said the one thing that could have destroyed everything. She woke up first. The room was filled with cold morning light. New York beyond the window looked indifferent and beautiful. The space beside her was empty. Water could be heard running in the bathroom. Olivia sat up in bed and slipped on his white shirt. The fabric was still warm from him. Her phone lay on the table, the screen glowing. A notification. Business Insider. She opened it. The photograph was sharp, public. He stood confident and composed. Beside him, a woman with a flawless smile. Nathan Cole to marry Charlotte Whitmore, wedding planned in 3 months. 3 months. The words did not register immediately, then too sharply. She felt something inside her tighten, not pain, cold. The sound of running water stopped. He walked out of the bathroom, drying his hands. He saw her face. Stopped. "Olivia?" he said quietly. She looked up at him, calm, collected, already different. "You're getting married?" she asked. There was no hysteria in her voice, only fact. The silence between them grew dense, and it became clear that night had not been the beginning of a fairy tale. It was the point after which everything would become more complicated. The morning light in the room was too cold for what had happened during the night. Olivia stood by the window with her back to him. His white shirt slipped softly from her shoulder. The fabric felt foreign, just like everything else around her. Her phone lay on the table. The screen had gone dark, but the words were still echoing inside her. Wedding in 3 months. Nathan Cole. Charlotte Whitmore. Nathan watched her in silence. He could feel it. The space between them had changed. During the night it had been alive, filled with breath and trust. Now it was sharp and fragile, like glass. "Are you getting married?" she asked, without turning around. Her voice was steady, almost calm. He could lie, he could soften it, he could call it a formality, but in that moment he understood that lying would be a betrayal, not of her, but of himself. Yes. One word, and the air in the room grew heavier. She closed her eyes for a second, only a second, just enough to contain what was rising inside her. Not hysteria, not tears. Pain. Cold. Conscious. She turned to face him. "Why am I finding out from the news?" He ran a hand through his hair, for the first time in a long while, losing his usual certainty. "It's an arrangement, a merger. It's not exactly what it looks like." Even as he said it, he heard how helpless it sounded. Merger, deal, strategy, words that worked in boardrooms, not in bed. She looked at him carefully. "Were you going to tell me?" Silence stretched between them.
The truth was brutal. He hadn't planned to. He didn't know how, didn't know when, didn't even know what to do with what he was feeling. "I didn't want you to find out like this." A weak answer. She nodded. "But you still didn't tell me." Not an accusation, a fact. He stepped closer. "What happened last night, it wasn't random for me." And that was the most dangerous confession of all. Because if it wasn't random, then it was a feeling. She felt her heart tighten. "I don't want to be a pause between your strategic decisions," she said, calmly. And in that calmness, there was strength. For the first time, he was afraid, not for his reputation, not for the wedding, for her. Because if she walked away now, she would walk away forever. "It's not that simple," he said. She shook her head. "For me, it is. He is getting married in 3 months, and last night he held her as if the world didn't exist." She walked past him. He caught the faint scent of her hair and knew he would remember it for a long time. The door closed softly. He was left alone, and for the first time, he admitted to himself. He was falling in love, and he had no idea what to do with it.
The office welcomed him with its usual glass and steel coldness. Financial charts glowed on the screens, metal surfaces reflected controlled light, voices were precise, efficient, measured. But nothing inside him felt precise. He saw her. Olivia sat at her desk, focused, composed, methodical. She didn't look toward his office, not once, and that hurt more than anything else. Charlotte arrived closer to noon, without warning. She wore a tailored dark suit, expensive and immaculate, her chestnut hair gathered into a flawless bun. She entered his office as if she owned the space. "I thought we should be seen together more often," she said with an easy smile, "especially before the corporate evening." She stepped closer and kissed his cheek, lingering just a second longer than necessary. The office saw. The assistant saw. Olivia saw. Nathan felt it physically. Charlotte took his arm and guided him out into the open space. "You look tired," she said softly. "I worry about you." She leaned into him just slightly. The gesture was gentle, but it carried ownership. Olivia lifted her gaze, just for a second, and then lowered it again. But that second was enough. He saw the way her fingers tightened around the folder, the way she straightened her posture, the way she became even calmer. That calmness struck him harder than any accusation ever could. He felt torn apart. On one side, obligation, family pressure, contracts, reputation. On the other, a feeling he had never planned for. He began to notice that every touch from Charlotte no longer brought warmth, only tension. Her words about their future sounded like instructions. Her smile felt rehearsed, and nearby sat the woman who demanded nothing, and that was precisely why she was dangerous. He knew he was hurting her, and he knew that if he didn't stop this now, the damage would grow. But he didn't know what to stop, the feeling or the life that had already been written years ahead. Later, alone in his office, he loosened his tie. Through the glass walls, the company continued as usual, normal, efficient, controlled. He caught his reflection in the darkened window. For years, right had been easy to recognize, profitable, logical, strategic. Now it felt hollow. For the first time, he understood something simple and terrifying. He was no longer certain that right meant marrying Charlotte, and that uncertainty was the first real crack in everything. The conversation did not begin beautifully. It began abruptly. Charlotte entered his office without knocking. The city behind the glass was already dark, the skyline glowing in cold precision. Inside the room, the light was warm, almost deceptively calm. "We need to confirm the announcement date," she said. "I've already spoken to the press." Nathan stood slowly. He didn't hide behind the desk this time. Charlotte stepped closer, her posture immaculate, her dark suit sharp against the soft light. Her chestnut hair was gathered into a flawless bun, every detail controlled, just like everything in her life. "This is important," she added. "You understand that?" He looked at her, and for the first time he did not answer automatically. "I'm not sure." The words were quiet, but they changed the air in the room. Charlotte's expression tightened. Not sure about what? He held her gaze, not cold, not aggressive, but steady. "About us." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. She stepped closer, almost searching his face. "Is this about her?" He didn't look away. He didn't explain. He didn't defend himself. And his silence became the answer. Something flickered in her eyes, not shock, not yet anger, loss of control. "You're making a mistake," she said finally, her voice sharper now. "Maybe." His heartbeat was loud in his own ears, but his voice did not tremble. "But I can't continue like this." The words were not dramatic, they were not loud, they were final. Charlotte took a step back, as if the room had shifted under her feet. "You have obligations, Nathan." "I know." He did. He knew about contracts, reputations, expectations, family pressure, but for the first time in years, those words felt secondary. "I won't pretend everything is fine when it isn't." She stared at him, seeing something unfamiliar in his face, not rebellion, not recklessness, choice. When she turned and walked toward the door, her posture remained perfect, but the silence she left behind was fractured. The door closed. Nathan stood alone in his office. The city lights outside looked distant now, almost unreal. He exhaled slowly. He was afraid, but underneath the fear was something else. Relief. It was the first no he had ever spoken, not to the market, not to a deal, but to a future that had already been decided for him. And somewhere else in the building, Olivia did not yet know that tonight he had taken the first real step toward her. Not toward certainty, but toward honesty.
Charlotte didn't cry. She never cried at the moment of impact. When Nathan said, "I'm not sure," there were no tears in her eyes. There was calculation. She left the office calmly. Too calmly. An hour later, his father called. "Have you decided to play romance?" The voice was cold. "Do you understand the kind of money behind this union?" Nathan stayed silent. He knew the numbers. He knew the terms. He knew that marrying Charlotte wasn't just a wedding. It was a guarantee of the merger, investors, stock value, access to the international market. "This isn't a game," he replied. "Then what is it? Did you fall in love?" The word sounded like an accusation. He didn't deny it, and that was a first. "You're destroying years of work," his father continued. "And for whom? A girl from the office?" Nathan closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't care how it sounded. "This is my life." "No," his father answered sharply. "This is business." The call ended, and he understood. The pressure was only beginning. The office had changed. Not physically, but in its atmosphere. Charlotte began appearing more often, not accidentally, strategically. Shared lunches, photos at the entrance, her hand resting on his shoulder in front of the employees. She didn't create scenes, she showed possession. One day she walked into the meeting room where Nathan and Olivia were discussing a project. "I'll steal him for a minute," Charlotte said softly, without looking at Olivia. Olivia nodded, too calmly, too professionally. Nathan felt something tighten inside him. In the hallway, Charlotte stopped. "You think I don't see it?" Her voice lowered. "You think I'll let some employee destroy what has already been signed?" "This isn't about destroying anything," he answered.
It's about control, Nathan, and you're losing it. She stepped closer. I'm not stepping back. And for the first time, he didn't see a fiancé in front of him. He saw a strategic player. 2 days later, a new article appeared in the press. Without his approval, strategic union of the Cole and Whitmore families confirmed. The wording was sharp. Commitment, stability, legacy. He stared at the screen and understood that he had been presented with a fact. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Board members, partners, investors. "I hope this is true," one of them said. "The market has already reacted." The stock price was rising. His personal freedom was falling. That evening he stood alone in his office. Everyone had gone home. Only the city lights reflected in the glass. He knew, if he stepped back now, everything would become easier. The reputation would remain intact. The family would be satisfied. Charlotte would get what she wanted. And Olivia would leave, quietly, without a scandal. He imagined her look, calm, composed, carrying a pain she would never show. And suddenly he understood. If he chose convenience, he wouldn't lose her. He would lose himself. For the first time in his life, the choice was not about numbers. It was about fear and about courage. His phone vibrated again. A message from Charlotte. "We need to finalize the engagement announcement tomorrow. No more hesitation." He looked at the screen for a long time. Then he locked the phone, and for the first time, he didn't reply. Olivia didn't say a single harsh word to him. She didn't reproach him. She didn't demand explanations. She didn't ask why he had stayed silent while the press was already printing the date of his future wedding. She simply became quieter. And in that silence, there was more pain than in any scream. In the office, everything looked the same. The same glass walls, the same reports, the same morning meetings. But now what stood between them was not distance. It was cold. She used to feel his gaze. There used to be something unspoken between their words, soft, almost dangerous. Now her eyes were steady, professional. "I'll have the final version ready by 6, she said calmly, handing him the folder. He touched her fingers by accident, and she gently pulled her hand away. Not sharply, not demonstratively, carefully, as if the touch itself could hurt. In that moment he understood. She wasn't protecting herself from him. She was protecting herself from her own feelings. He watched her walk down the corridor, straight back, confident steps, not a single unnecessary movement, not a single uneven breath. But he knew her too well. He knew how she used to hold her breath when he stepped closer, how she would blush when their fingers intertwined in the dark that night, how she looked at him as if the world could fall apart and they wouldn't care. Now there was determination in her eyes, and that frightened him more than anything. He wasn't losing her because she had stopped loving him. He was losing her because she had chosen to survive. That evening, he found her in an empty conference room. Outside, the city glowed with lights, as if nothing were happening, as if no one were standing on the edge. She was looking at the glass. In the reflection, they were standing side by side. In reality, a single step remained between them. "Olivia." His voice sounded quieter than he expected. She didn't turn immediately. "Nathan, don't." He stepped closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume, close enough to remember that night, that honesty, that freedom. "I'll choose you," he said. She closed her eyes. Not from happiness, from pain. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I don't want to be the person who destroys families. It's not because of you. For them, it is." She turned to face him, and in her eyes there was love. Not doubt, not fear. Love. Deep, real, dangerous. "I love you," she said softly.
The words hung in the air like a verdict. He took a step forward. She stayed where she was. Exactly because of that, I'm leaving first. Something inside him broke. Don't decide for me. I'm not deciding for you. Her voice trembled for the first time. I just don't want to watch you tear yourself apart between me and your name. He wanted to hold her, pull her close, convince her, but she stood too straight, too proud, too strong. If you truly choose me, she said, do it not because you're afraid to lose me, but because you can't live any other way. She walked out, and he understood. If he hesitated any longer, she would disappear from his life as quietly as she had entered it.
He went to her place at night, without calling, without warning. The door wasn't locked. Her apartment still carried the scent of her perfume and something else. Goodbye. The lights were off. The silence was so thick it pressed against his chest. A scarf lay on the table, a cup with unfinished coffee, her book open in the middle, as if she had stepped out for just a minute, but he knew she hadn't. On the kitchen counter there was a note, short, I need time. He read it several times. There was no accusation in those 3 words, no reproach. There was love, the kind of love that refuses to destroy. He sat down on the couch and for the first time in a long time allowed himself not to be the heir, not the future husband, not the strategist, just a man afraid of losing the woman he loves. He remembered the way she laughed, the way she looked at him that night, open, without defenses, the way she whispered his name as if it were the safest place in the world. And he understood. If she leaves for good, he will be able to keep the shares, the contracts, the family name, but he will not be able to keep himself. For the first time, he felt not pressure, but emptiness, and love that does not scream, but remains, even when she is no longer there. The morning was cold. Nathan was looking at the laptop screen, where the official engagement statement was already open. At the bottom, there was a date. 3 months until the wedding. Yesterday, it had seemed inevitable. Today, impossible. He hadn't slept, not because of pressure, because of emptiness. Her words echoed in his mind. If you truly choose me, do it not because you're afraid of losing me, but because you cannot live any other way. For the first time in his life, he understood the difference. Before, decisions were made by formula, risks, prospects, strategy. Today, his heart was beating too loudly for calculations. The board meeting began at 10. His father sat across from him, strict, composed. Charlotte, calm, perfectly assembled. The press waited outside the door. We are ready to announce the official date, one of the partners said. Nathan stood. For the first time, not as an heir, not as the representative of a family name, as a man. There will be no wedding. Silence fell sharply. Charlotte did not change her expression, only her fingers tightened around the folder. This is not an emotional decision. It is an honest one. His father rose. Do you understand what you're doing? Yes. For the first time, he did not waver. I cannot build a union that is not the truth. The press learned about it 15 minutes later. The shares began to fall 20 minutes after that. He did not look at the graph. The phone did not stop ringing. It vibrated across the glass surface of his desk again and again. Father, partners, unknown numbers, headlines already forming somewhere online. Nathan stood by the window with his back to it. The city looked gray now, colder than yesterday, indifferent. He did not turn around. The world was reacting. He was not. Finally, he answered one call. Charlotte. Her voice was steady, controlled. Are you choosing her? There was no anger, no accusation, only calculation. I'm choosing the truth, he replied. Silence stretched between them. Then you'll lose a lot, Nathan. He watched his reflection in the glass, not the heir, not the future CEO, just a man who had stepped out of a system. Maybe. Are you sure she's worth it? For the first time, he did not analyze the question. He remembered her eyes by the window, the way her voice trembled when she said she loved him, the way she tried to walk away to protect him from himself. This isn't about worth, he said quietly. It's about life. Charlotte exhaled slowly. Then good luck, she answered, because now you're alone. The line went dead, and for a moment he felt it. No protection of the family name, no strategic alliance, no guaranteed outcome. The structure he had grown inside of was already shifting. He was exposed, but strangely, he was calm. For the first time in his life, the silence in the room did not feel like pressure. It felt like space. Space to stand, space to choose, space to live without calculation. Yes, he might lose position. Yes, the market would punish him. Yes, his father would not forgive him quickly. But losing everything built on fear was not loss. It was freedom. He picked up the phone once more. No hesitation, no justification, just certainty. He had chosen. And this time, the decision did not belong to the board. It belonged to him.
He went to her, without a script, without beautiful words prepared in advance. The door didn't open immediately. When she finally appeared in the doorway, her face was calm, but her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "It's all canceled," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "The press?" "Yes." "Your father?" "Yes." "Charlotte?" "Yes." He stepped closer. "I didn't choose you because I was afraid of losing you. I chose you because without you, I no longer recognize myself." Her lips trembled slightly. "This isn't impulse?" "No. For the first time, this isn't business." She was silent. And in that silence, more was being decided than at any board meeting. "You understand it won't be easy?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "That it will hurt?" "Maybe." "That you'll have to start almost from nothing?" He smiled for the first time in a long while. "With you, it's not nothing." The silence shifted. She stepped closer, so close that there was no distance left between them. "I didn't want to destroy your life," she whispered. "You saved it." He touched her face carefully, as if afraid she might disappear. She didn't step back. For the first time, she wasn't protecting herself. "I love you," she said, and there was no pain in those words, only truth. He held her, without fear, without calculation, without witnesses. Outside, the city kept moving at its own speed. The shares were falling, the partners were discussing consequences, the family name was losing stability. But for the first time in his life, the choice was not about legacy. It was about love.
Epilogue. 3 months later. 3 months later, he was not standing at an altar arranged by strategy. He was standing on the shore of the ocean. No press, no investors, no negotiations. Just her. A white dress, simple, without excess. The wind lifting her hair, her eyes lighter than they had ever been in that office. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. He smiled. Now, yes. And in that moment, the world stopped being a negotiation. It became a place where you can live and love, not because it is profitable, but because anything else is impossible.